Hello there, this is Mr. Dunway, and you get to see my face this time. We're jumping up to chapter 1-7, talking about the distributive property and some things that go with that. We skipped a couple of sections in here because honestly it's stuff that you should know. And I probably told you this in class, but you should glance through these sections that we skipped, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, and 1.6, and just make sure you're comfortable with the ideas of things that are going on in there. Again, since you're in an advanced math class, it's just stuff that we would expect you to know. So look that stuff over, and if you have questions on it, come see me. We can talk about it. But we need to do a little bit of review. This is actually a review from things that were in those sections that you're supposed to know or be aware of. And one of them is just some of the basic properties you should be familiar with. So number one here, they're asking you for the name of this property of addition, illustrated. And you notice that the solution to this, 7 plus 0, is the same thing, same number that you started with. Whenever you add 0 to something, you get the same number. That's called identity, okay? And you can think of it like this. The identity is who you are, right? So if you add 0 to something, you get the same thing that you started with. That's its identity. And then if I were to say, well, what would the multiplication identity be? Where if you multiply something and you get the same number that you started with, that would be 1 times something. That's the multiplication identity, or multiplicative identity right there. So that's a review from one of these sections we skipped, as well as this one. The property of multiplication, whenever you multiply something and get 0, that's called the 0 property. And that's just stuff that you know by nature, but you might be expected to be able to call it the 0 property. So just kind of refresh yourself with that particular name would be great for us. Then number 3 says circle the property that is illustrated by. And then notice you have 63 plus 9 plus 1 is equal to 63 plus 9 plus 1. So what that means is that they changed the grouping of which was added first, and that's the associative property, which I showed you right there. Okay, and if I were to go on down the page just a little bit here, let's see what else we have here. The multiplication property. Well, that one, notice it's similar to the identity property, but they multiplied it by a -1, and whenever you multiply it by -1, you get the opposite of what you started with. You started with 52, you ended up with the opposite value of that. That's called the property of -1 there. So that is, like I said, some things from the previous sections that that you'll want to freshen up on if you don't remember. Now this is a pretty important property for us here, and so that's why we're taking this particular chapter to look at it and make sure you can do it correctly. It's called the distributive property, and the distributive property is basically it's to distribute. It means to give or to hand out. Here's the math example of what it looks like. Here you see this 7 right here. Then you see 7 times 3 plus 6. Well, we could, if I were to work that out, really the right way, the order of operations would say that we would do this first, right? 6 plus 3, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that would be 7 times 9. If we were to work that out the old-fashioned way, and doing that, you would get, hopefully, 63 if you multiplied that correctly. But notice what they did here. Let me erase some of my markings. And notice what they did is next to it, instead of doing the 3 plus 6, they took this 7 times 3, and they multiplied it, and then they multiplied the 7 times the 6. Well, let's see what happens if I did that. I'll tell you what, I'm going to change color here, and see if I have a little, I've got some space right there. I'm going to kind of show you what happens here. If you take, I'm going to change to red here so we don't get it confused, 7 times 3 plus 7 times 6. If I were to do it that way, notice you get 21, and then 7 times 6 is 42. And if I add those two numbers, notice what happens. I get 63, which was the same thing I got up here. So the point is, either one of these ways will work. Okay, so if you have this thing set up where you have a number here multiplied by a parentheses, here you could do that where you multiply these two numbers by that number out there. You'll get the same thing. So you're probably saying, well, why would we need to ever do that if you haven't seen this before? Well, there are times where you cannot add the numbers inside the parentheses. That's what we're going to look at in this lesson today. The point of this is that these two values are the same. Right? These two things come out to be the same value, whether I do it this way here or if I do it this way here. Okay, now we'll get more into that later. These questions here I'm not too concerned with, so if you want to write those down, fine. If not, just move on to the next page. The words there, distributed, distribution, and distribute. And the point is they're just trying to see if you understand what the word distribute really means. So that's neither here nor there. Let's move on to page number 2 in your notes. Page number 2 looks like this. Whoops, I meant to put a shade up here. So I'm going to go get one. Bear with me here as I put up my shade for you and get back to my full screen, which is right there. Come here, full screen. There we go. All right, it says complete this table. You have A. So right here you have an algebra way of telling you a rule, and this is basically the distributive property idea right here. You have this A, all right, being multiplied by everything in that parentheses. Now in your notes, this would actually be good to draw these little arrows like I did, and I didn't draw them very good. And the smart ink is so thick, I can't make it any thinner. Draw little rocket arrows from the A, showing you that you're multiplying A times both of the terms in there. So if I were to evaluate this one, now you would go ahead and add those together normally, but they're trying to prove the distributive property here for you. So bear with us, play along, and realize they're trying to tell you that if you take 14 times 3, you'll get the same thing as if you take 3 times 10 and 3 times 4 and then add those together right there. It's important that you understand that. Okay, so that's what they're trying to do here. And it doesn't matter in this case that the A is here. What it's telling you is that this A is multiplied by those two things, and you still get this BA plus CA. It would be the same thing. Here's an example. You have 5 plus 3 times 7. All right, you could add 5 and 3, get A to multiply, or you could take 5 times 7 and 3 times 7 and add those together and get the same thing. And the same thing holds true over subtraction. If that's a subtraction sign, all you need to do is make sure that that sign stays subtraction. There. Okay, 9 times 8, 9 times 2, then you would subtract those values and get that. And then again, it doesn't matter if the A is on the front end or the back end for you. All right, now let me stress again, if you were doing this problem for real on a test, I would really expect you to go ahead and subtract those numbers and then multiply it by 4. But there are going to be times when you can't do that, and that's when we need the distributive property. You'll see that soon. So let's take a look at one of those examples right here. All right, this says, what is the simplified form of 5 times parentheses x plus 7? Okay, this is an example. You cannot add x plus 7. Can't do that. Okay, you can because those are not like terms, and we'll see that later in the lesson. It says, circle how you read this expression. Before we go on, it says 5 times x plus 7 or 5 times the quantity x plus 7. And this is the one that you should circle because 5 is being multiplied by a quantity of x plus 7. Let's say you had x, let's say that that was x, and then this little thing was 7. Right? Well, this 5 is telling you that you have that thing 5 times. It tells you how many you have, so it's like you have 5 x plus 7s. There's 1, 1, 2. That's the third one, fourth one, the fifth one. And we'll actually look at these type of models later to try to turn abstract things into things that make sense. So it says to simplify 5 times the quantity x plus 7, which number do you distribute? How do you know? Well, Basically, you would distribute the 5. How do you know? It's because the 5 is outside the parentheses. That's the idea behind that, right there. And then in number 11, they have you fill in the blanks. 5 times the quantity x plus 7, so you would go 5 times x, so x goes in that box. And then you would take 5 times 7, so 5 goes there, so you have 5 times x plus 5 times 7. And if we were to go ahead and work that out, 5x is just 5x, 5 times 7 is 35. So the solution there is 5x plus 7, and you can't do anything more on that. And we'll look at the reasons why on that later. All right, I'm over 10 minutes here, so I'm going to have to stop this so YouTube will take it, and we will pick up on number 10 in our next video.